Welcome to Core Concept HQ, where big ideas are simplified. Today's book summary is The Art of Spending Money. Simple Choices for a Richer Life. You know, it's funny, we spend so much of our time, especially in personal finance, talking about how to get money.
Right, the accumulation phase, the earning, the saving, the investing.
Exactly. And it's all treated like it's this pure science.
Yeah.
You know, spreadsheets, optimization formulas, compound interest tables.
Minimizing fees, all of that. It's very cold.
It is. It's very logical, very numerical. But that's not the whole story, is it? Because when you take that money off the balance sheet and bring it into the real world, it's a whole different ballgame.
It's a complete transformation. And that's really the core conflict we're digging into today. I mean, if acquiring money is a science, then spending it or, deploying it to build a better life, that is absolutely an art.
That's a great way to put it, the art of it.
Yeah, and it's a critical paradox. Money is, you could argue it's the most flexible tool we've ever invented. It can buy independence, comfort, a better life, but, and this is the huge but, knowing how to make a lot of it is a completely different skill set from knowing how to use it for genuine, durable fulfillment.
So people can be brilliant at the science part and completely lost with the art part.
Totally. Our source material really emphasizes that our actual real-world relationship with money is just incredibly messy. It's driven by these really deep-seated psychological forces.
Not the logical formulas.
No, not at all. It's things like our social aspirations, our envy, our deepest insecurities. It's all emotion and psychology.
Yeah. That framing is so sharp.
Yeah.
Because it immediately forces you to kind of categorize your own relationship with money.
Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, is this a powerful tool that I can use to live better, on my own terms?
Right.
Or is it just this exhausting yardstick of status that you're constantly using to measure yourself against your neighbors or your colleagues or even, total strangers on the internet?
And that yardstick is the trap. That is 100% the trap. So the central goal of our deep dive today is to really unpack this art. How can we actually deploy money, and it doesn't matter if you have a little or a lot, to secure a happiness that actually lasts?
So it's not just about the momentary thrill of buying something.
Exactly. What the research shows, and it's so interesting, is that money often does buy happiness, but it almost always does it indirectly.
What do you mean by that? Indirectly?
Well, it buys you independence from a job you hate. It buys you the ability to pursue a purpose you care about. It buys you the time to spend with the people you love. If you miss that crucial step and you just keep chasing more and more acquisition,
Yardstick.
You're just chasing the yardstick, and you'll find that real, enduring happiness is always rooted in contentment. And that's a state of mind that money by itself simply cannot purchase. So today, we're going to try to figure out how to bridge that gap.
All right, let's get into it. And maybe the best place to start is with one of the most, it's a famous anecdote from the research that really sets the stage for why spending so often feels completely divorced from actual pleasure.
Yeah, the story of the high-end furniture show. It's a perfect example.
So paint the picture for us. What happened?
Okay, so the setting is this very, very exclusive furniture show. Think top-tier, incredibly expensive pieces. And the hosts of our source material, they're watching this man who's about to purchase an armchair for $21,000.
$21,000.
For an armchair.
$21,000. And, for a lot of people listening, that's a nice new car. For some, it's a full year's income. It's just a staggering amount of money for one piece of furniture.
I can't even wrap my head around that. But the real kicker, as you said, wasn't just the price tag. It was his justification for it. That's it. He saw that, the bewildered looks on the staff's faces. He seemed almost apologetic about it, but also resigned. And he just said, I know, it's crazy, but when you have money, this is what you're supposed to do.
Wow. Supposed to do.
That phrase, supposed to do, is the anchor for this entire deep dive.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It highlights this completely mindless, almost dictated chase for material success. He wasn't buying it for comfort,
Right, he probably didn't even sit in it.
Probably not. He wasn't buying it because he felt a deep spiritual connection to the upholstery or the craftsmanship. He was buying it because he believed that societal expectation demanded it as proof of his status. His spending was an act of conformity. It had nothing to do with utility.
And that right there is why spending is an art, not a science.
Yeah.
There's no calculator function for what you're supposed to do. There isn't a universal right way to spend money because your preferences, my preferences, They don't come from clean logic. They're learned from our unique and sometimes, pretty painful life experiences.
This idea is summed up so beautifully by this guiding principle that's often used in therapeutic settings. It comes from the foster care system, actually, and the
Hmm.
principle is all behavior makes sense with enough information.
All behavior makes sense with enough information. I like that.
It's so powerful, and when you apply it to finance, it's a game changer. When you look at someone's, seemingly bizarre financial choices, why one person hoards every penny and another splurges on things that seem ridiculous, once you peel back the layers of their past, their unique story, those choices often start to make a strange kind of sense.
They become logical, but only within that person's specific history.
Exactly. They rationalize themselves. And we see those past experiences show up in two main ways that really dictate our current spending. They either manifest as wounds we're trying to heal or as trophies we feel like we have to display for the world.
Okay, let's break that down. Wounds and trophies. Give me an example of a trophy.
Okay, a classic example of the trophy motivation is the story of the successful businessman. He grew up feeling really snubbed, looked down on because his family didn't have much money. So fast forward, he's very successful, and his daughter gets into a few colleges. He insists she attend the absolute most expensive school she got into,
Even if a cheaper option was, better academically.
even if it was arguably better, because for him, that outrageous tuition bill, it wasn't an expense, it was a trophy, a huge, potent social trophy that screamed to the world, and maybe more importantly to his younger self, look what I've overcome, look what I can do now.
That makes perfect sense. The spending isn't about the education. It's about broadcasting his success. So about the other side, the wound.
The wound is the flip side of that coin. The sources profile a financial educator, someone who is incredibly successful, has made a lot of money, but she suffers from what they call post-traumatic broke syndrome.
Post-traumatic broke syndrome, that's a heavy term.
It is, and it means she finds it almost impossible to spend her hard-earned money. The fear of scarcity from her past, the trauma of living paycheck to paycheck for so long, it's so deeply ingrained that it paralyzes her. She keeps saving and saving well beyond any logical point of financial security because she's terrified that one big purchase could send her right back to where she started.
So you have two wealthy people. One can't stop spending to prove his status, and the other can't start spending out of fear.
Exactly. Their behaviors are complete opposites, and you could argue both are irrational, but they make perfect sense only when you have that key piece of information about their past.
And what's really profound here is how financial distress or scarcity, it literally changes how you perceive time. All the advice we hear about saving, which is geared toward this long-term, future thinker,
Yeah.
it becomes completely useless for someone who's just trying to survive today.
That's what's called the time horizon divide. There's this conversation in the source material between a social worker and a poor couple that is it's devastatingly clear. The social worker suggests they try to save a tiny amount each week to avoid a potential eviction down the road.
Which sound like standard, sensible financial advice.
Right. But the husband just started laughing. He called the social worker a future thinker. He explained that for them, their vision of the future was limited entirely to the next 24 hours. Sometimes, he said, just the next 5 minutes. It was all about where the next meal was coming from.
Wow. The idea of saving for next year is an impossible luxury when you're worried about the next hour.
It's not even on the radar. It's like speaking a different language. And that's
Okay.
the textbook definition of survival mode.
Yeah.
All your cognitive bandwidth, all your mental energy is dedicated to immediate threats.
There's another story that drives this home even harder, right? The one about the public defense lawyer's client.
Yeah. This client goes into a restaurant, orders a meal, eats it, and then tries to pay for it with Monopoly money.
So, okay, your first thought is this person mentally impaired? Is this a prank? What's going on?
Exactly. But the lawyer's explanation was so simple and so profound. He just said he was poor and he was hungry. The client wasn't trying to make some grand statement about the economy. He was operating on a survival instinct so primal that the abstract rules of currency just defense. They broke down in his mind. The lawyer called his clients Zen masters of the right now.
Zen masters of the right now. That phrase really sticks with you.
It does. And while that's an extreme example, the psychology behind it applies to anyone under high-pressure financial stress. When you're constantly worried about rent or a medical bill, you are cognitively overloaded. Scarcity puts this massive tax on your brain, which makes long-term, abstract planning like saving for retirement. It makes it nearly impossible.
And it has nothing to do with intelligence or willpower.
Nothing at all. It's about bandwidth. And realizing this should give us all a dose of humility. Our values are really just our preferences, and those preferences are born from our own unique past. So it's deeply immature, and frankly, it's useless to assume that your own sensible, maybe middle-class spending habits should be some kind of universal law for everyone else.
Whether they're wealthier than you or struggling just to get by.
Right. And that brings us back to this fundamental truth from financial advisor Tim Maher. He said, personal finance is more personal than it is finance.
I love that quote.
It's perfect. If you find deep fulfillment in international travel or collecting rare books, who are you to tell someone else that their passion for high-end sneakers or classic cars is a waste of money? Their preferences come from living their life.
And the danger in judging other people's spending is that it tricks you into thinking your way is the only right way. And that stops you from ever being introspective about your own choices.
Exactly. You have to see spending as an art form, unique to every single person, not a scientific equation with one right answer.
Okay, so if we accept that it's personal, that it's an art, let's dig into one of the biggest drivers of that art. Let's talk about chasing attention.
Yes.
That man spending 21 grand on an armchair because he felt supposed to, that proves that the desire for nice things isn't really about the things themselves. It's a mask for a much deeper, more primal desire. We crave respect and admiration from other people.
We really do. And we mistakenly believe that if we just get the right symbols of success, the nice car, the big house, the fancy watch, that the attention and respect will just automatically follow.
And there's a really powerful thought experiment you could do to prove this to yourself, right? The reverse obituary test.
Yeah, it's simple but incredibly effective. If you were to sit down and write your own ideal obituary right now, what would you focus on?
Well, you'd instantly realize it's all about what they call eulogy virtues. You know, that you were loved, you were respected, you were a good spouse or a good parent, you were helpful, generous, loyal.
Exactly. You definitely wouldn't dedicate a paragraph to your peak salary, or the horsepower of your car, or the square footage of your house. Those are resume virtues. Right. And that contrast shows that deep down, we instinctively know that our stuff doesn't actually translate into lasting respect or love.
What's wild is that this isn't some new thing caused by social media. This has been true for a long, long time.
Oh, centuries. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, he wrote about this back in 1759. He said that people are driven by avarice and ambition, but not just to get the basic necessities. He argued that what really drives us is the value we place on being attended to, on being noticed with sympathy and approval.
So we value the attention more than the stuff itself.
Far more. The stuff is just the ticket you buy to get into the attention game.
That's a painful but really necessary distinction to make.
Yeah.
Because if the real prize you're after is attention and respect, then relying on your possessions to get it is like trying to live on junk food.
That is a perfect analogy. Junk food admiration. It's tempting, it's satisfying for a split second, but it's ultimately damaging and it never lasts.
So the goal should be to focus on intrinsic pride, right? Pride in who you are, what you've accomplished, the skills you've built, not extrinsic pride, which is all about what other people think of your clothes or your car.
And the data on this is crystal clear. Psychologists have found again and again that people who anchor their identity in that extrinsic pride, chasing status symbols and approval, they are consistently more anxious, more depressed, and more likely to abuse substances.
Because they're constantly looking outward for validation instead of building it from within.
Exactly. They spend so much energy on the junk food that they have no appetite left for the nourishing stuff, like family, friendship, learning new things. It's a bad trade.
So this leads us to a really practical framework we can use. Before every purchase, we have to ask ourselves this critical question. What am I actually buying here? Is this for utility or is it for status?
The utility versus status framework. It's the decision point for everything. Let's use the car example again, but let's really expand on it.
Okay.
So on the utility side, you might have a high-end Toyota or a Subaru. It could be fully loaded with every feature for safety, comfort, great gas mileage, amazing sound system. It's built to last a decade. You own that car because it serves your life.
Right. Makes your commute better. It's reliable for your family. It's for you.
It's for you. Now, on the status side, you have the entry-level BMW or Mercedes. It might actually be less comfortable, have fewer features, cost more to maintain, but it has the badge.
Badge.
You own that car primarily for other people. You're hoping to change a stranger's opinion of you at a stoplight. You're trying to impress a client or a neighbor. You are paying a premium for the social signal, not for the transportation.
And the trouble starts when you get those two things confused.
Mm.
You tell yourself you're buying it for the great German engineering, but really,
Yeah. But really, you're paying a heavy tax in debt, in maintenance, in anxiety, for a fleeting chance that someone else will look at you with a little bit of envy.
in this chase for status, it leads you right into what the book calls the status game trap.
It's inevitable. Because you have to ask what makes something high status in the first place. It's always its exclusivity and its scarcity.
The fact that not everyone can have it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the moment that thing, whether it's a European vacation, a college degree, even owning stocks, the moment it trickles down to the masses, it immediately starts to lose its status value.
There's a great example of this with the Broadway play Hamilton.
Oh, it's perfect. When it was new and tickets were impossible to get, seeing Hamilton was the ultimate status symbol for a certain crowd. But then during the pandemic, it became available on Disney Plus.
And everyone could see it.
Everyone. And suddenly, a lot of those elite college students who had been obsessed with it just stopped talking about it. They dismiss it as old news because they valued the scarcity, the exclusivity of having seen it live more than they valued the actual art itself.
So the pursuit of status is just this constantly moving target. It's a game you were designed to lose.
You can't win because the goalpost is always being moved one notch higher. The pleasure you get from utility, on the other hand, the comfortable ride, the reliable appliance, that's durable. It lasts as long as the product does. But the pleasure from status is so fickle because you constantly have to look to the next, more exclusive thing.
That's why focusing on utility is described as being deeply selfish in a beautiful way.
I love that phrase. It's beautiful because it allows you to express your own individual identity based on what genuinely makes your life better, instead of being forced to conform to what other people think is cool.
So the takeaway is always, the true value of any purchase is how it helps you live the life you want, period.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, so this feels like a good time to shift inward a bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the engine that drives all of this. The pursuit of happiness itself, the happiness equation. And we know the core psychological concept, which is just so simple and powerful. All happiness in life is simply the size of the gap between your expectations and your circumstances.
And the consequence of that is just, it's brutal. If your expectations grow faster than your income, you are destined to never be happy. It doesn't matter how much you earn. You are stuck on the hedonic treadmill.
You're just running in place financially and emotionally.
Completely. And this is illustrated perfectly by that classic story, the parable of the Mexican fisherman.
Right. So an American businessman is on vacation, and he sees a local fisherman who only works a few hours a day, catches just enough fish for his family, and then he's done.
And the American is just, appalled by this inefficiency. He goes up to the fisherman and lays out this whole 10-year plan for him. Work harder, buy more boats, hire a crew, build a canning factory, sell the company, and retire a millionaire.
And the fisherman, quite logically, asks, and then what would I do?
And the American says, well, then you could sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a nap, play guitar with your friends in the evening.
Which is exactly what he's already doing.
Exactly. Now, the lesson isn't that ambition is bad or that we should all quit our jobs. The lesson is that the key to happiness is realizing that it's the state where nothing is missing. And you get to define what that state is. If you can define enough, you win the game.
But our brains are just valued. They're wired against this idea of enough, aren't they? That's the dopamine trap.
It's a huge trap. The brain is an insatiable, novelty-seeking machine. It's always asking what's next, what's missing. That chemical chase is what kept our ancestors alive, but it actively works against our contentment now.
You can even see this in how we assign value to things.
Oh, absolutely. The perceived value of something is universally highest before you have it. That's the anticipation, the dopamine rush. Then, the moment you acquire it, the value plummets. That's the post-purchase letdown.
And then, ironically, its value shoots back up if you lose it.
Yeah, right. Because only then do you recognize its true utility. Your brain loves the chase more than the actual prize.
And that explains so much. It explains why getting rich doesn't automatically sustain happiness. Richard Nixon actually observed this. He said, for ordinary people, having a nice house or traveling is a huge deal. But once the super successful get those things, they become the new normal. They mean nothing because the dream is gone.
It's the same reason athletes often feel relief, not pure joy, after winning a championship. The expectation was so high that achieving it just brings them back to zero, and the treadmill immediately restarts.
So if our brains are wired to constantly chase, how do you win? How do you get off the treadmill?
Well, the sources argue that the only way to win the dopamine game is to consciously decide to stop playing the acquisition game. And that's why contentment is the ultimate psychological mountaintop. It's why the Stoics said not needing wealth is more valuable than wealth itself.
It's like you're redefining the equation.
You're completely redefining it. The most powerful definition of wealth is what you have minus what you want. You can play the game by trying to constantly increase what you have, which is hard and depends on external factors.
Yeah.
Or,
You could play the game by decreasing what you want.
which is entirely internal. And that is a game you can actually win. It leads to durable, lasting satisfaction.
Okay, that sounds great in theory. But in practice, fighting that hedonic treadmill, the speed at which we get used to nice things, it's a constant battle. The practical solution seems to be about managing expectations down and using the power of contrast.
Yes, the story of Michael May is such a powerful mental image for this. This is a man who was blind for decades and then regained his sight at age 26.
Right. And when he first could see, he wasn't blown away by a beautiful sunset or a mountain range.
No, he was absolutely transfixed by a standard drab, gray office carpet. He was just exclaiming, "Look at the shapes, look at the colors." His biographer said he got 10,000 times more pleasure from that boring carpet than we would from the most incredible sunset.
And the difference wasn't the carpet. It was the contrast. The contrast with the total darkness he had known his whole life.
Contrast is what creates joy, not baseline luxury. If you make luxury your baseline, the joy vanishes. It's why Ernest Shackleton's crew, after surviving for 19 months freezing and starving on the Antarctic ice, felt overwhelming ecstasy when they finally got a simple hot bath and a warm bed.
They were ordinary comforts, but the contrast made them feel like the greatest luxuries on Earth.
And you don't need to go through a polar expedition to apply this. Just living a simple, moderate life ensures that when you do have an occasional special experience, a big vacation, a lavish meal, it generates so much more joy than if those things were just your everyday normal.
So the goal isn't self-deprivation. It's joy maximization. You're engineering contrast into your own life.
Exactly. If you put as much effort into keeping your expectations in check as you do into improving your circumstances, you are setting yourself up for a kind of contentment that money can only enhance but could never create on its own.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the highest utility money can buy. It's not a thing. It's not a service. It's independence.
This is maybe the most important point of the whole deep dive. The sources define true rich as being the freest people, the people who are most in control of their own lives, their own schedules, and their most precious asset, which is their time.
And that leads to this really counterintuitive idea that every dollar you save isn't just sitting there. It's already been spent.
It has been spent. It's been spent on something intangible but incredibly valuable. Independence, freedom, autonomy. You are, in a sense, frivolously spending on independence, and the ROI on that is higher than anything else.
Because every dollar you save buys you a little piece of your future back, while every dollar of debt sells a piece of your future away.
Perfectly said. And you see the consequences of this trade-off so clearly when you contrast the stories of two NBA players, Antoine Walker and John Urschel.
Okay, so Antoine Walker made an incredible amount of money.
A staggering amount, $108 million over his career. And he spent it all, excessively, on pure external status. He had a personal payroll of 30 friends and family. He owned 6 or 7 luxury cars. His life became completely dictated by the need to feed this massive expense machine.
And he lost control.
Totally. Filed for bankruptcy. And from that point on, his life was run by the courts and his creditors. He gave up all of his autonomy.
Now, contrast that with John Urschel.
A completely different story. Urschel was a 5th-round draft pick, made a tiny fraction of Walker's salary, about $600,000 a year. He lived this remarkably modest life, drove a used Nissan, saved the vast majority of his income.
So he maintained total control.
Total control over his options, which allowed him to retire at 26 to go get his PhD in mathematics at MIT, where he now teaches.
And when you ask people whose life they admire more, it's not even a question. It's Urschel's control over his own path that is the truly enviable asset.
100%. Walker became a slave to the expectations that came with his $100 million. Urschel was the master of his $600,000.
The history of the Vanderbilt family is like this same story, but just amplified by 100. A huge historical warning about losing control.
It's a shocking story. Cornelius Vanderbilt left an inheritance that would be worth about $300 billion today. And within 60 years, it was almost all gone.
How is that even possible?
Because, as one family member said, their guiding life purpose became expense regardless of pleasure. Their money wasn't a tool for happiness. It was this massive psychological and social liability. They were trapped by the obligation to maintain the family's elite status
So they had to build bigger houses, throw more lavish parties.
and compete with all the other wealthy families, whether they actually enjoyed any of it or not. The money controlled them. Reggie Vanderbilt is the perfect example. He inherited what would be about $350 million today. His only purpose in life was, in his words, to keep himself from being bored.
And he ended up.
He died broke at 45. His life was dictated by liquor and gambling. He was just servicing the lifestyle, not using the money.
It's such a tragic contrast to someone like Chuck Feeney.
The complete opposite. Feeney co-founded the duty-free stores, made a fortune, and realized the private jets and the high life it wasn't for him. So he spent his life giving away 99.99% of his $8 billion fortune.
While living a simple life himself.
Flying coach, living in a modest apartment, he found his purpose in giving. He said, I'm happy when what I'm doing is helping people. He used his wealth as a tool. He never, ever let it become his master.
Feeney was truly wealthy because he was free. He was independent. And this brings us to this hidden cost of money, a concept called social debt.
Social debt. It's the obligation, the pressure, the unwanted attention that your spending draws, which always ends up costing you time, privacy, or peace of mind.
For most of us, it's pretty subtle, right? It's the pressure to always host the expensive dinner parties to keep up with your friends.
Or buying a luxury car and then having to constantly worry about where you park it, about door dings, about the insurance. You buy a thing, and now that thing owns a piece of your mental energy.
The story of Frank Lucas is the extreme example of this.
The drug dealer, right. He was successful because he was mostly invisible, but then he felt this compulsion to show off at the Ali Frazier fight. He wore this incredibly conspicuous $100,000 chinchilla coat.
And that coat was a massive social debt.
It was immediate and total. It attracted the exact unwanted attention of the NYPD, and it led directly to his capture and a 70-year prison sentence. His status spending cost him his freedom.
For regular people, it's the lottery winner who suddenly loses all their privacy, or the rookie athlete who feels this obligation to support dozens of family members.
Yes, that unsolicited social debt can cripple them. And it's also the self-imposed pressure we all feel to constantly escalate. You buy a $50,000 car, and now there's this unspoken pressure to replace it with a $60,000 car in a few years, just to maintain your perceived social standing.
It's why they say it's expensive to be rich. If you're constantly trading your control for status, you're always chasing, and you're always paying that social debt.
So the ultimate goal, the best possible position you can be in, is to be rich and anonymous. You have the financial freedom to live an amazing life, but you carry zero social debt. You use your money to buy control, not as a symbol for other people to judge you by.
Which is a game you're guaranteed to lose.
A game you will always lose.
Okay, so let's talk about integrity. Financial and emotional integrity. Since none of us know how long we have, the central challenge is balancing saving for tomorrow with living for today. And the best tool for that, the sources argue, is the regret minimization framework.
Right. At every crossroads, you have to ask yourself, what will I regret more later?
So when you're deciding, should I put this $5,000 into my retirement account or spend it on this big family trip?
The risk isn't just the financial loss of that $5,000 plus its future growth. The bigger risk might be the regret you'll feel in 20 years for not having that memory.
Jeff Bezos famously used this framework when he was deciding whether to leave his Wall Street job to start Amazon. He pictured himself at age 80.
And he knew he would regret not trying far more than he would regret trying and failing. We have to apply that same level of philosophical weight to our own spending choices.
When we regret changes as we age, right? When you have young kids, you might regret not saving more. But 30 years later, you're far more likely to regret the trips you didn't take or the time you didn't spend with them.
Which is why the source material makes this brilliant point that good memories are assets that compound over time. They appreciate in value every single year.
I love that. So a job that pays $10,000 less but gives you 500 more free hours a year. Over a career, that's 15,000 extra hours of potential memories.
And those compounding memories will be worth far more to you later in life than the extra income you barely would have noticed.
But this brings up a trap. What happens when your financial habits become your actual identity? The danger of money identity.
It's a huge danger. Let's say your identity is, I am a disciplined saver. You could fall prey to what's called frugality inertia.
Meaning you win the game, you achieve financial freedom, but you can't stop playing.
Exactly. The saving habit is so ingrained That even when you have more than enough money to be generous, to travel, to retire, you're trapped in that scarcity mindset. You can't enjoy the freedom you work so hard for.
It's a tragedy victory. The whole point was to stop having to think about money. But if saving is your identity, you can never stop thinking about it.
Even someone like Charlie Munger, the legendary investor, showed signs of this. Shortly before he died, he joked that he regretted he might have had multiple trillions instead of multiple
I
billions.
mean, it shows how the ambition itself, the identity of being a master investor, can become this all-consuming force, no matter how successful you are.
So the advice is to keep your identity small. Don't let your financial beliefs become a tribe. Money should be a tool you use to leverage who you are, never a definition of who you are.
Let's talk about the final paradox in this section, which is about small expenses. The $3 latte question. There are two contradictory but equally true ideas about this.
Right. The first is the compounding argument. This is championed by people like John D. Rockefeller, who saved hundreds of thousands by cutting one single drop of solder from each oil can.
And Warren Buffett, who measured the cost of a haircut by its future compounded value of like $30,000.
It shows that small, consistent changes at scale or over decades can have a massive impact. But
But then there's the opposing view, which is Parkinson's law of triviality, the bike shed effect.
which says that the amount of attention a problem gets is often the inverse of its importance. People will obsess for hours over the $3 latte question because it's simple, it feels controllable.
And at the same time, they'll ignore the $30,000 questions. The college loan, the overpriced car, the house they can't afford.
It's a cognitive dissonance. Focusing on the tiny, trivial thing makes them feel responsible, which ironically makes it easier to ignore the massive decisions that will actually determine their financial future. So you need both ideas. Tend to the small things at scale, but focus your main energy on the big questions.
So, wrapping this all up, since there's no magic formula, it all comes down to experimentation, finding your own personal spending fit.
It's the wide funnel, tight filter approach. You have to be willing to try a million different things to figure out what actually brings you joy. Experiment with different kinds of travel, food, clothes, hobbies.
And then you have to be ruthless with the filter.
Absolutely ruthless. If you spend money on something and it brings you nothing but anxiety or a fleeting thrill, you cut it. No guilt, just cut it.
And if you can't find anything that brings you joy, if all spending feels empty,
That's a huge warning sign. It probably means money has entrapped you and you're just defaulting to what society tells you to like, which is usually just the most expensive thing.
let's touch on the most emotional spending of all, kids and parenting.
Yeah, the core lesson here is that money cannot buy the things that truly matter for a good life. Love, health, a sense of belief in oneself.
There's a profound story about a priest who delivers last rites. In loving families, the dying parent is thanked for things like believing in me or for their moral support.
Whereas in strained, materialistic families, they're thanked for things that cost money, paying for college, buying the house. It shows what kids truly value in the end.
So the goal with money for your children is to be a safety net, but never a fuel that robs them of their own ambition or the dignity that comes from their own hard work.
Exactly. You can't let them start life on third base and think they hit a triple.
And finally, let's close with the ultimate lesson, which is kindness. It's surprisingly self-serving in this context.
It really is. It's about being kind to everyone because you have no idea who you might need to rely on for help or wisdom or an opportunity later in life. It's about maximizing your social compounding.
The story of Kevin Costner is just perfect for this.
It is. He let a down-and-out writer friend crash on his couch. The friend wrote furiously while he was there, and that script he was writing. It became the Oscar-winning film Dances with Wolves.
Which launched Costner's career into the stratosphere.
It's quiet compounding in a social context. You never know where that act of generosity will lead. Wealth can isolate you, but staying humble and kind keeps you open to all the unexpected luck that life has to offer.
So the ultimate goal of mastering this art is to use money to achieve that quiet compounding. You're not frantic, you're not chasing,
Correct.
but everything you want to achieve is happening steadily. You're using money to live the life you choose, free from social pressure, jealousy, and regret.
If you can do that, if you can be rich and anonymous, money is finally serving you instead of the other way around.
Realize that having money might highlight or magnify an incredible life, but it cannot create that life on its own. True wealth is independence, the ability to control your time, and the self-awareness to define success on your own terms. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, at Core Concept HQ, we simplify powerful ideas to help you live smarter. See you in the next summary.